So in 2017, so 8 years ago, I had the idea for a girl who could remember that in a past life she was murdered and she wanted to solve who killed her. And I tried to write the book as like a thriller, as a fantasy novel, and nothing was really working. So I put the idea to one side. And then in 2020, Taylor Swift released the song Exile. And there was this lyric that was, I think I've seen this film before and I didn't like the ending. And I thought, maybe there were lots of past lives and she's seen this film a lot of times before and now she's trying to change the ending. She needs to survive this time. And that was like, okay, I think I have it. But it wasn't until I was like, she's in love with the person who keeps killing her. I was like, okay, now I have this relationship dynamic to explore. And then, yeah, it was just a lot of fun to explore all their past lives, to go back 1,000 years to all these different historical periods and see kind of how they got to where they are and how they could change it. It was obviously very difficult in terms of research, for one thing. Thankfully, I love research. I love looking into different historical periods. But it was difficult to find the kind of research that I wanted. Like often if you Google a certain year in a certain country, you'll find a Wikipedia page, right, of all the political things that were happening, all the historical events. But you don't really get the information on what it was like to live there. You don't get what were people smelling, what were people hearing, how did people talk to each other. And so it took a lot of deep digging to find those kinds of like really specific pieces of information. And so it meant that every time I wrote a past life, it took weeks or months to write like this really short section. And then the other challenge was figuring out how these characters would change over the course of 1,000 years, because we are obviously only who we are in relation to our life circumstances. You are who you are because of where you grew up and kind of the interests that you had and who your family were. And yet for Evelyn and Arden, that was always changing because they were born into different genders, different races, different bodies. And so I really had to go into who are we, like, beneath all of that, like what makes a soul, and what do we take with us from life to life? And so it was really difficult to keep them consistent in each life, but also changing to reflect the circumstances that they were in. So it was a big kind of maths problem of a book, you know, trying to get everything to slot together, and everything had to be in 17-year increments, and it was very difficult, but I had a lot of fun. So I've always wanted to write for adults as well as young adults. It's just that whatever adult books I wrote, they didn't sell. So that's why I kept writing YA, but I always knew that I wanted to debut an adult. And unlike Our Infinite Fates, so Our Infinite Fates took 5 years from idea to writing, 2017 to 2022. This took 2 days because I watched a movie with my husband and we watched The Departed. And if anyone's not familiar with The Departed, it's about a detective who goes undercover into the mafia, finds out that the mafia has someone in the detectives, and they have this kind of cat and mouse chase almost. And at the end of the movie, I just said to my husband, I was like, that would have been cooler if they had magic. And then I was like, that would have been cooler if they had magic. And I'm like, if they wore cloaks and they had magic wands, what if there were dragons? Like, how much cooler would that make it? And so 2 days later, I emailed my agent and I was like, what if The Departed had magic? And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, it's too late. I'm already writing it. And she was like, okay, I trust you. Fine. So it was a really like the inspiration just came immediately. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the story. And I knew it had to be adult to be as gritty as I wanted it to be. I don't think you can write about the mafia and detectives for a younger audience. It's just sort of fundamentally a more mature setup. Yeah, so the magic system is that magic is fueled by pleasure and pain. And a mage has this kind of internal well. And if they experience pleasure, they get more quantity of magic in their well. And if they experience pain, the strength of the magic is sharper. And this really came to me, it was actually in the second edit the second draft of the book. The first draft didn't have that magic system. They had wands and they had spoken magic, but there was no sense of where the magic came from. And I knew I wanted like kind of a harder magic system with an explanation. And I was really inspired by the role that adrenaline plays in like conflict, in war. And like a soldier can be mortally wounded, they can be bleeding out and in a lot of pain, but they still get that adrenaline, that survival instinct that helps them just kind of like give it one last shot. And so that's where the pain thing came for me. I'm like, it doesn't last, it's fleeting, but you can get this really sharp burst of power in like dire circumstances. And then the pleasure was because, you know, as people, if we're going through a hard time, if we've had like a really stressful day at work, or if we're going through heartbreak or grief, we seek comfort in pleasurable things. We'll have like a hot bath, we'll have a hot chocolate, maybe a bottle of wine. We'll, you know, seek things that are pleasurable to us, and it will kind of soothe us and restore us. And so I really wanted to have both of these things in play and explore how different characters related to each of those things. You know, you have characters in this book who have chronic pain issues, which make their lives more difficult, but also make them more powerful. So they have this complicated relationship with magic. And then you have characters who don't believe that they deserve pleasure because they're very, you know, they hate themselves that much, but they need to have pleasure in order to have magic. So I just thought it created all these interesting dynamics for me to explore. I'm really glad that they're finding audiences in the Spanish-speaking world. It's really cool to be here in Mexico. So yeah, thank you so much.